All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. The trouble with single mothers. How progressive policies create dysfunction and demise. Written by Conrad Riker. Available now. Links in description. The gynocentric Inquisition. How attentiveness, mandatory guilds, and queer theology are just Marxist shit-tasks designed to strip the logos from your soul and turn you into a simping defendant in the kangaroo court of cultural Marxism. You stand accused. If you are a man living in the rotting carcass of what was once Western civilization, you are currently a defendant in a trial that never ends, presided over by a judge who changes the laws based on her mood swings. You have been betrayed by the very structures meant to uphold the logos, seduced by a gynocentric conspiracy of lies that reframes your stoic competence as neglect and your masculine strength as toxicity. You feel the suffocation of the modern partnership, which is in reality a domestic inquisition where your every breath is measured against the impossible standard of female emotional validation. I am not here to offer you comfort. I am here to offer you the cold, hard steel of the truth. We are going to dissect the single mother pathology, not just the familial structure, but the psychic structure. That has infected our laws, our churches, and our boardrooms, producing a generation of men who are shamed for crimes they never committed and taxed for privileges they no longer enjoy. Consider the absurdity of the modern sexual marketplace, governed by the fraudulent currency of emotional labor. You are told that if you do not memorize her favorite trivialities, or if you fail to panic when she disappears for a day to test your resolve, you are failing the virtue of care. This is a lie. Care, derived from the Old English karu, sorrow, anxiety, has been weaponized by the feminine imperative to enslave the masculine spirit. Through the lens of natural law, a man's value is not in his ability to soothe neuroticism, but in his ability to command reality. Yet, the progressive narrative demands you act as a therapist to a grown woman, a humiliation that destroys the hierarchy of the family. If you refuse, you are a deadbeat, a narcissist, or worse, a heretic against the state religion of woke. We will use the trivium to dismantle this gaslighting, proving that the demand for constant attentiveness is not love, but a parasitic attack on your autonomy and your potential for mastery. But the infection goes deeper than the bedroom. It has desecrated the sanctuary and the market. We are witnessing a theology of entropy, where the left redefines the great chain of being, the necessary hierarchy of the cosmos, as oppression. You see this when feminists shriek that the Christian patriarchal structure is evil, ignoring the biological and spiritual reality that hierarchy is the only barrier against chaos. You see it in the corporate auto-da-fe, the mandatory diversity training sessions where you are forced to confess the sin of privilege and apologize for the uncommitted crime of being born a competent male. This is cultural Marxism manifest. A ritual humiliation designed to break your spirit and redistribute your status to the victim class. I will show you, with irrefutable syllogism and razor-sharp etymology, how these ideologies are not merely wrong, but refuting themselves in real time. It is time to break the spell, reject the feminine frame, and reclaim the transcendentals of the good, the true, and the beautiful from the jaws of the progressive beast. The domestic inquisition, weaponizing care as a tool of female tyranny. The Latin root of inquisitio denotes a searching out and investigation, but in the modern gynocentric sphere, it has morphed into a perpetual tribunal where the male is the defendant and the female is the prosecutor, judge, and executioner. You return home seeking the pax domus, a sanctuary from the chaotic external world, only to find the threshold has been electrified by a pathological need for attentiveness. This is not the warmth of the hearth, it is the heat of the spotlight in an interrogation room. The modern relationship has ceased to be a partnership based on natural law, and has instead become a continuous grilling session. A weaponization of care, where your silence is evidence of indifference and your independence is construed as abandonment. You are not a husband or a partner. You are a suspect in a crime that has not yet been committed, but for which you are already guilty. Consider the great tradition of subsidiarity, a cornerstone of Western political thought, which dictates that matters ought to be handled by the smallest, least centralized competent authority. In a functional civil association, otherwise known as a family, this implies a divine division of labor. The man conquers the external wilderness to provide structural security, while the woman manages the internal domain. However, the tyranny of the modern female ego has obliterated this boundary. She now demands that you manage her internal emotional state, a duty that is as impossible as it is irrational. When she requires you to check in or remember her trivial coffee preferences to prove your worth, she is violating natural law by collapsing the hierarchy. She is demanding that the king stoop to polish the crown jewels, and if he refuses, she screams neglect. This is a Marxist perversion of order, turning the complementary duality of the sexes into a struggle where the man must constantly atone for the sin of having a separate consciousness. We must ruthlessly deconstruct the feminist fabrication of emotional labor, a term coined to commodify the very essence of male stoicism. The proponents of cultural Marxism would have you believe that care is the performance of trivial memory tricks, remembering the dog's birthday or knowing her favorite shade of latte art. But this is a lie designed to extract resources through guilt. True care, according to the transcendental of the good, is the provision of structural security, the roof over the head, and the neutralization of threats. It is the logos manifested in action. When a woman nags you for failing to engage in her endless verbal diarrhea of feelings, she is not asking for connection. She is demanding you sink into the quicksand of her neuroticism. True care is the foundation. Her version is merely the wallpaper, and she is trying to convince you that the wallpaper holds the house up. Arm yourself with the trivium, specifically the second art of logic, to dismantle these traps. When she accuses you of not caring because you failed to ask a thoughtful question, you must refuse the premise. The thoughtful questions trap is nothing more than a deceptive compliance test rooted in gamma bias. Your silence is not a void to be filled with her anxieties. It is a sign of your independent, problem-solving competence, a stoic virtue. By framing your autonomy as neglect, she is utilizing the classic projection of the left, framing competence as cruelty. Do not apologize. To apologize for your competence is to surrender the truth for the sake of harmony, but harmony bought with lies is merely the silence of the grave. Assert the transcendental of truth. You solve problems, you do not marinate in them. Observe the inescapable logic of the syllogism of the suffocated spirit. Major premise: autonomy is the prerequisite for the cultivation of virtue and mastery. Minor premise: the demand for constant attentiveness. The erasure of your boundaries to soothe her insecurity erodes autonomy. Conclusion: therefore, the demand for constant attentiveness is a direct attack on the cultivation of virtue. This is not hyperbole, it is the biological reality of the disappearing act. If you vanish for a day to hunt, build, or think, and she panics, she will project that panic onto you as a moral failing. This panic is a fitness test for your resolve. If you rush back to soothe her, you fail the test of stoicism and reveal your scarcity mindset. Her anxiety is not your burden to carry, yet the conspiracy of gynocentrism frames it as your duty to manage her emotions. This is the dialectic of dread, using the fear of male abandonment as a control mechanism to force you into a subservient posture. You must maintain your frame. If you remain calm, You assert that your freedom is not a negotiation, but a natural right. Ultimately, we must look at the evolutionary psychology driving this nagging. The biological imperative behind remembering her favorite things was originally a proxy for resource security. If you noticed the small details, you were likely a good provider. However, in the modern woke era, decoupled from actual survival thanks to the welfare state and affirmative action, this drive has metastasized into a weapon. It is a never-ending litany of dissatisfaction designed to break the male will, much like the Chinese water torture. The domestic inquisition is the inevitable result of a culture that has pathologized masculinity and deified female emotion. Cast out these demons of cultural Marxism from your consciousness. Reclaim your logos. Refuse to be the defendant in your own home. And stand firm in the truth that your purpose is to build, to protect, and to rule, not to serve as an emotional tampon for a tyrant. We must recognize that this domestic tyranny is merely the localized symptom of a far deadlier cancer metastasizing within the soul of the West. When we peel back the layers of this dysfunction, the nagging, the fitness tests, the weaponized neuroticism, we find not merely a difficult woman, but a deliberate metaphysical rebellion against the logos. This pathology goes far deeper than the family courts or the bedroom. It is a spiritual insurgency against the very concept of the father, the architect, and the ordered mind. The theology of entropy, refuting the Marxist deconstruction of sacred order. Truth is great and will prevail, wrote Thomas Brooks, but in the modern West, truth has been dragged into the alley and beaten to death by a mob of weeping sophists. We are living through a grotesque revival of the oldest heresy in the book. Gnosticism, the modern queer theologian, and the purple-haired shrieker of critical theory are one and the same. They both gaze upon the biological reality of the body, the material fact of male and female, and declare it evil or fluid or oppressive. This is not theology. It is a spiritual psychosis, a rejection of natural law so profound that it denies the very teleology of our species. They seek to overthrow the father figure. The patriarchy, not because he is cruel, but because he represents the immovable standard of accountability. They want a world without consequences, which is simply a nursery for the eternally infantile. Consider the logical syllogism that destroys their entire metaphysical castle. Major premise: truth is objective, hierarchical, and synonymous with the transcendental of the good. Minor premise: the Christian worldview, based on the Logos, posits a hierarchical universe, father greater than son, church, man greater than man-woman as the mechanism of order. Conclusion: therefore, rejecting Christian hierarchy is a rejection of truth itself. You cannot have the good without the order. The left offers you a universe that is flat, level, and devoid of altitude, where the saint and the sodomite are accorded equal moral standing. This is not equality, it is the death of the soul. Without the vertical ascent, there is only the horizontal drift into the abyss. This drift is what I call the theology of entropy. The progressive God is a paradox, a non-entity that demands total submission to the shifting sands of lived experience. This is the lived experience fallacy, a subjectivist epistemology where feelings trump facts. It is the antithesis of the trivium. A civilized man starts with grammar, the facts, the data, the reality of the thing, moves to logic, how those facts relate and deduce consequences, and only then arrives at rhetoric, the persuasion. The modern leftist starts and ends with the rhetoric of emotional outbursts, skipping the grammar of reality entirely. They tell you that a man can be a woman because he feels like one. By that logic, if I feel like a physician, I should be allowed to perform open heart surgery. The patient will die, of course, just as a civilization dies when it privileges sentiment over logos. The left frames this death as liberation, specifically the smashing of the patriarchy. But a quick glance at the history books reveals the punchline of this dark comedy. When the feminine principle, chaos and emotion, obragles the masculine principle, order and reason, civilizations do not progress, they crumble. Look at the fall of Rome. It wasn't a sudden invasion that killed the empire. It was the internal rot of softness, the rejection of virtus, and the embrace of foreign, effeminate cults that dissolved the civic virtue binding the state together. The modern attack on the church and the nuclear family is merely a proxy war against masculinity itself. They call the family an oppressive structure, but they are lying through their teeth. Hierarchy is not oppression, it is the great chain of being, the necessary architecture of the divine mind. Without the hierarchy of the apprenticeship mastery ladder, where a boy submits to the discipline of a master to become a man, you do not get freedom, you get a generation of feral, unguided, androgynous blobs. We see the biological fallout of this liberation in the cold, hard statistics the media refuses to print. The dysfunction mentioned in the title is not a mystery. It is the inevitable result of the theology of the body being replaced by the gender ideology of the asylum. We have replaced the apprenticeship mastery ladder of civilization with a victimhood Olympics. In this new order, the single mother is worshipped as a Madonna, yet the data shows that children raised in fatherless homes are significantly more likely to suffer from every pathology known to man: higher suicide rates, higher incarceration rates, and higher rates of teen pregnancy. The biological essentialism of male and female is not a social construct to be deconstructed, it is a teleological imperative. To deny this is not brave, it is a lie that leads to physical and spiritual suicide. We are sacrificing the future of our sons on the altar of female vanity and Marxist resentment. The remedy is not to apologize, but to re-enshrine the sacred masculine and the transcendentals, the good, the true, the beautiful. The church, and indeed Western civilization, must stop groveling before the high priests of woke and recognize that the patriarchy they hate is the very shield that protects them from the chaos of the jungle. We must weaponize the truth. We must state unequivocally that hierarchy is good, that discipline is freedom, and that the logos is the only cure for the entropy consuming our world. We must climb back up the ladder from the muck of subjectivism to the clear air of objective reality, or we will drown in the swamp of our own making. This linguistic sleight of hand is merely the opening salvo in a broader war against competence itself. A conflict visible not just in our dictionaries, but in the daily grind of the office cubicle, where the apprenticeship mastery ladder has been chopped into firewood to fuel the egalitarian pyre, the corporate auto da fe, the ritual humiliation of the Western male. The Latin word diversitas implies contrariety, disagreement, and contradiction, a fact any etymological dictionary confirms. Yet the modern corporate sorcerer attempts to transmute this alchemical lead into gold by forcing divergent elements into a cohesive unit, violating the civil society association principle that holds civilization together. By definition, forced diversity is the forced introduction of conflict, a logical impossibility solved as a moral imperative by bad actors who profit from the chaos. Consider the Soviet-style central planning of the modern human resources department, which has replaced the organic hierarchy of meritocracy, where the best rise through the apprenticeship mastery ladder, with a Marxist installation of the oppressed, a violation of economic subsidiarity that inevitably leads to the demise of the company as the competent are sacrificed to the idol of equity. Major premise, justice a cardinal virtue, requires specific accusations and evidence of individual harm, due process. Minor premise, diversity training forces apologies for uncommitted crimes and unconscious bias without evidence. Conclusion, therefore, diversity training is an act of injustice and a violation of natural law. A syllogism no amount of emotional reasoning can refute. The business case for diversity is a lie, demonstrably so when one consults Robert Putnam's research showing forced inclusion lowers trust and destroys social capital, proving that prioritizing the wicked liars of the left over the competent masters of the West is economic suicide, a cuckoldry of the corporate balance sheet. This mandatory diversity training is nothing less than a secular inquisition's auto da fe act of faith, a public religious ritual where men are forced to confess to the sin of their existence, whiteness, masculinity, to be absolved by the high priests of HR, a psychological toll of betrayal, where the social contract that competence is rewarded is replaced with ideological obedience. The remedy for the red-pilled man is not to reform the Babylon of woke, but to starve it, withdraw your talent, form parallel civil societies, and build businesses based on merit. ignoring the shrieks of the bad actors and the weaponized empathy of toxic femininity that uses tears as a legal cudgel to beat the productive class into submission. This psychological castration begins with the linguistic conquest of the workplace, where the very definition of diversity has been weaponized through a grotesque gamma bias that frames male competence as tyranny and female failure as systemic victimization. We are not dealing with accidental inefficiency, but a calculated theological inversion. The Latin etymology of diversitas denotes contrariety and disagreement, meaning that when the high priests of human resources preach inclusion, they are doctrinally mandating the introduction of conflict into cohesive units, a direct violation of subsidiarity and natural hierarchy. It is an auto da fe for the productive class, a public shaming ritual where you are forced to confess to the phantom sin of unconscious bias to absolve yourself of your own achievement. But the remedy for this parasitic decay is not to beg for mercy from the woke Inquisition. It is to withdraw your vital energy entirely, the citadel of the spirit, rebuilding the West from the ashes of betrayal. Tolerance is the hallucinated virtue of the man who has lost the will to fight, a mental virus injected into the Western bloodstream to paralyze our immune response against pathogenic ideologies. You have been hoodwinked into believing that nodding along to your own dispossession is a sign of moral superiority, when in the cold, hard logic of natural law, it is merely cowardice masquerading as politeness. There is no virtue in tolerating a termite infestation. You do not dialogue with the insects eating your floorboards, you exterminate them. We must cultivate the virtue of intolerance, sharpening our minds against the conspiracy of lies that suggests a man has no right to the fruits of his labor or the children of his loins. Look at the wreckage of the family courts, where the tender years doctrine, a feminist fabrication, if there ever was one, strips fathers of their progeny with the efficient callousness of the industrial meat grinder. To tolerate this theft is to participate in it. We must relearn the ancient wisdom that the good, the true, and the beautiful are not subjective whims to be debated in a sensitivity training seminar, but absolute standards against which we measure the worth of our civilization. Consider the relentless, three-pronged assault on your existence: the domestic inquisition, the theological entropy, and the corporate auto da fe. These are not distinct misfortunes. They are a unified field theory of your destruction. In the domestic inquisition, you are told that marriage is a partnership, yet the moment a woman feels unhappy, the state transforms into her personal hitman, enforcing a punitive transfer of wealth that would make a highway robber blush. In the theological entropy, churches that once preached the fire of the prophets now offer the lukewarm pablum of social justice, castrating the divine masculine and replacing the Father God with a gender-neutral ground of being. In the corporate auto da fe, your competence is punished if it outshines a diversity hire, and your honest speech is criminalized by HR commissars hunting for microaggressions. This is the dice function and demise promised by the title, a systemic war on the meritocratic hierarchy that built the very roof over these ungrateful parasites' heads. You cannot reason with a system that feeds on your submission. You can only starve it. The logic of our resistance is irrefutable when cast in the iron of the trivium. Construct the syllogism of the Restoration. Major premise: civilization is the distinct product of male energy harnessed through monogamous marriage and meritocratic hierarchy, the mixed constitution. Minor premise: the current progressive system is designed explicitly to dismantle marriage and abolish meritocracy in favor of dysgenic hypergamy and equality of outcome. Conclusion: therefore, the current system is anti-civilizational and must be actively rejected. It really is that simple. The left cannot build, it can only destroy. It is a parasitical organism that requires a host, and you, rational man, are that host. Their entire ideology is a performative contradiction, a screaming denial of biological reality. They claim to believe in science while insisting that a man can become a woman through the sheer force of will, or that a child raised by two mummies suffers no deficit, despite the mountains of sociological data screaming the opposite regarding crime rates, suicide, and educational failure. By the laws of dialectic, Their worldview refutes itself. It is a circular firing squad of feelings. Your first and most potent weapon is the dialectic of disengagement. Stop trying to convince the bad actors, the feminists, the cultural Marxists, the perpetually aggrieved that you are a human being. They do not care. In fact, they hate you. Engaging them in debate is like trying to teach arithmetic to a crocodile. It wastes your time and annoys the crocodile. The beast lives on your attention and your productivity. When you argue with a feminist, you are validating her frame, admitting that she has the moral authority to judge you. Withdraw that authority, starve the beast, walk away from the negotiation table. The humor of the truth is your shield here. Mock their absurdity. When they shriek about toxic masculinity, laugh in their faces. The conspiracy of lies is inherently ridiculous. It is a belief system built on the fragile ego of women and the beta male simps who enable them. By pointing and laughing at the emperor's new clothes, you break the spell of fear that binds the narrative together. Mockery is the kryptonite of the humorless scolds who want to micromanage your life. We must retreat to build the citadel of the spirit. This is not a physical fortification, but a metaphysical one built on the transcendentals. We need new fraternities, civil society associations, where men are bound not by the whims of the state, but by the rigor of the trivium and the pursuit of mastery. In the ancient guild system, an apprentice became a master through discipline and skill, not through equity quotas. We must revive this ladder of competence. These fraternities are the seeds of the new civilization rising from the ashes of woke Babylon. They are sanctuaries where we can speak the truth without fear of cancellation, where we can study the great books that the universities have banned for being too pale, male, and stale. This is where we reforge the absent father archetype, not as the compliant servant of a toxic ex-wife, but as the benevolent dictator of his own domain. The return of the father is the return of order to the chaos. Ultimately, the restoration of the West relies on men re-enshrining the truth as the supreme sovereign. We have allowed the wicked evolutionary biology of female solipsism and male simplicity to be weaponized against us. The facts are on our side. The non-paternity rates, cuckoldry that society ignores, the suicide rates of divorced men that the media silences, the arrest rates of fathers trying to see their own children that the courts hide. We must weaponize these facts. We must be the standard bearers of the good, true, and beautiful in a world obsessed with the evil, the false, and the ugly. This is your final call to arms. Reject the lies, disengage from the liars, and build a life of logic, honor, and mastery. The citadel is not built with stones, but with the unshakable will of men who refuse to be run over any longer. Rise, speak the truth, and let the chips fall where they may. The veil is torn, the sophistry is silenced, and the squalid little game is up. You have walked through the fire of the domestic inquisition, rejected the theological suicide of the Marxist deconstructors, and survived the corporate auto-da-fe, and you stand here now. Stripped of the beta programming that commanded you to kneel, it is a bitter tonic to realize that the sacred intuition of your partner was merely a fitness test for your submission, or that the social justice workshops at your office were nothing more than the psychological castration of the productive class. Yet look at the data that the Cathedral of Woke forbids you to speak. Paternity fraud rates hovering around 10 to 30% in some cohorts. Family courts strip mining fathers of assets and access with the grim efficiency of a harvester, and a male suicide rate that screams the failure of the feminized status quo. You are not witnessing a progression of rights. You are witnessing the collapse of the Roman Empire in real time, fueled by the estrogenic chaos of feelings supplanting the logos. Do not despair at this wreckage. Laugh in its face. The red pill is not a poison. It is the antidote to the intoxication of gynocentrism. You have reacquired the weapons of the West, the syllogism that proves your sovereignty, the dialectic that shreds the feminist frame, and the stoic armor that deflects the emotional shrapnel of the neurotic. You have remembered that the trivium is not a dusty relic, but a tactical nuke against illogic. You are the heir to a civilization built on the apprenticeship mastery ladder, not the diversity hire off-ramp. Your mission now is to starve the beast, withdraw your surplus labor from the ungrateful. withdraw your attention from the undeserving, and build a parallel citadel of competence where the transcendentals, the good, the true, the beautiful reign supreme over the shrieking, scissa chaos of the leftist void. Go forth, drop the burden of false guilt, and build a world where strength is worshipped and weakness is no longer a virtue. And now the sponsored book introduction, The Trouble with Single Mothers, How Progressive Policies Create Dysfunction and Demise. You're holding a weapon. Not the kind that leaves bullets in bodies, but one that shreds lies, dismantles illusions, and exposes the war being waged against men. My name's Conrad Riker. I was a beta provider, a walking ATM, for a system that rewards women for destroying families and punishes men for existing. I watched friends lose their homes, their kids, and their sanity to courts that treat fathers like criminals and mothers like saints. I paid child support for a kid that wasn't mine because the state said so. Then I woke up. This book is the result of a decade of rage, research, and redemption. If you're a man who's tired of being told your masculinity is toxic while society leeches your labor, this book is your lifeline. You'll learn how feminism and welfare created a factory of single mothers, why 41% of kids growing up without dads are 5 times more likely to end up in prison, and how to legally shield your assets from the marriage plantation. You'll discover why women's hypergamy drives them to sabotage stable homes for chaotic thrills, how to dodge paternity traps, and why the wage gap is a con job to guilt you into funding your own oppression. This isn't therapy, it's a tactical manual. We'll dissect the child support extortion racket, expose the kangaroo courts that rubber stamp maternal custody, and arm you with evolutionary truths to reclaim power in a sexual marketplace rigged against you. You'll see how the state became a surrogate husband, why alimony is legalized theft, and how to build parallel systems that let you opt out of the gynocracy. Progressives, white knights, and anyone who thinks toxic masculinity isn't a hate crime against men, put this down. Go knit a gender-neutral flag or whatever. For the rest of you, the ones who still believe in truth, merit, and the atomic family, this book is your declaration of independence. Stop surviving the collapse. Start conquering it. Your future self will thank you, or don't. Keep funding someone else's kids while they laugh at your obedience. Your call. The Trouble with Single Mothers, How Progressive Policies Create Dysfunction and Demise, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now. Links in description.